For many of us, Jan Maskell needs no introduction. She's the engagement lead for the Northwest region for the Investors in the Environment programme. She's a chartered occupational psychologist, a chartered member of CIPD, and a practitioner member of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. She has many years of experience in learning and development with a focus on management and coaching. As a sustainability consultant, she enjoys enabling organisations to reduce their carbon footprint and engaging their staff, crucially, to achieve this. And hence, why she's extremely well placed to give us some tips on how to motivate our colleagues to act more sustainably. So I will now hand over to Jan. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you for setting up that so nicely. We only have a very short period of time today, so some of those big questions that you put there, we will only scratch the surface. And I'm going to introduce you to, well, you may have come across some of the models before, but we will touch on some models which you could go away and explore further after today's session. So, as Camilla said, I'm a chartered psychologist, member of the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, and a practitioner member of IEMA. And one of the things that I like about being a principal consultant for investors in the environment is the emphasis on engaging people. And I think that's what differentiates our scheme from a lot of other schemes, which just do a lot of measurement. So we emphasize the importance of involving other people and getting them to, as Camilla said, think about their behaviours and what they might do differently. So, what are we going to do today? So I'm going to cover a couple of models with you. The first one is the COMBI model of behaviour change, and the second one is the 4Es framework. We're going to discuss a few things before we get to that, and then we will actually look at a third framework and compare and contrast those. And I'll finish up by just what I've pulled out as some of the top tips, but you might be making notes about your own ideas as we go through this session and deciding that's a really good idea. I need to remember to do that when I'm trying to implement behaviour change at work. So the focus of what we're doing here is about behaviour change in the workplace. And it's what's often called pro-environmental behaviour change, or environmentally sustainable behaviour change. So that's what we're looking at. But some of the principles about behaviour change apply to any behaviour that we might want to change. So, quick poll to start off with, and I want to know what you think. So I want you to think about, in your working environment, which of these do you think apply? Do you think that at work most people resist change? Do you think at work most people will change? Or not quite sure about that. So Camilla's going to set up the poll for us. So if we could spend just a moment completing that, and then Camilla will let me know what the results are. So this is you thinking about...
I'm Jan, sorry.
Yes.
For some reason, the poll has now disappeared, although it was there when we checked it earlier. April, can you see, have you got the poll as you logged in as Pact 2 maybe?
Ah, there we go. It's there.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. So yeah, if you could just give a single choice here, which of those three do you think? At work, most people will resist change. And often we have this adage that resistance to change, people don't like change. Or do you think that at work, most people will adopt change? Or are you not sure? If you could just complete that poll now, and then we can have a look at what the results are. And I'm looking forward to seeing these results, because I don't know. It'd be helpful for me to know what you think about how people respond to change at work.
Just waiting for about 20% more of the attendees. If you have a response, if you enter that now, and then I'll end the poll.
Thank you, April. That's really interesting. See the results there. Only very few people are not sure. We have a resounding majority of 69% saying that at work, most people will resist change. So people feel like we're already up against a barrier for change and trying to get people to change. There's about a quarter of you think that at work most people will adopt change, and as I say, 6% are not sure. And I think this may reflect your experience of change and maybe also your knowledge about change and how to implement it. So thank you for that. Close that off. And then so we're going to look at some issues around change, about responses to change and what we might do about it. And then we'll look at some of the models that I mentioned before. We'll keep that poll response in mind while we're doing it. So reasons people give for not behaving sustainably. So what are the sorts of reasons that people might give? Now, I'm going to give you a few options here. You may have come across lots of other reasons that people give, but these are the ones I think I come across most often. First one is, why should I change? So why should I change, particularly if no one else is doing it? So that's why should I? It sounds a bit teenagerish, doesn't it? Why should I? Next one is, I don't know what to do. So I can't change because I don't know what you're expecting me to do. It's too expensive. The next one would be, I don't want to. Now, you often find that that may be masking some of the other reasons as well. And there may be combinations of reasons. And the last one I'm noting here is, it's too difficult. So these are reasons people give for not changing anything, but specifically for not changing their behaviour to be more sustainable. So we will come back and look at these in a little bit to see what we might do in relation to these. So I'm going to ask you to think about some things now. Think of examples of new things that you have chosen to do. And that can be anything at all. It could be in work, it could be outside work, it could be something recent, it could be something a while ago, but just anything at all you can think of that was something new that you have chosen to do. And if you can pop that in the chat, and then Camilla can maybe read some of those out for us. So things that people have chosen to do. So I'm asking you to think of anything at all in your life, something new that you have chosen to do.
All right, we've got some good ones coming through. So cycle to work, turn off the Wi-Fi and appliances every night.
Can I stop you a minute? It doesn't have to be anything sustainable. It could be anything at all that you've chosen to do.
Excellent. Join a choir. That's a good one.
Lovely. Yeah.
Donate clothes to charity. Go paper free. Recycling soft plastics through the co-op. Joined a sports club. Well done. That's always a good one.
Yeah, lovely.
Oh, lose weight. Learn tennis. Turn off electrical appliances before going to sleep.
Some lovely examples there.
So, good ones.
Yeah, yeah. And a combination of things which are sustainable behaviours, as well as things which are not. And the idea is that throughout our lives, we do choose to change our behaviour. So I'll give you some examples which are not about sustainability. So we had someone joining a sports club. So it could be taking up a new hobby or sport, could be anything from reading, photography, painting, knitting. I took up skiing a few years ago, and I carried on doing that. I took up kayaking a few years ago and have stopped doing that because I get too cold doing it, which is a bit strange because I like skiing, but I'm wrapped up warm when I do that. Visiting somewhere new. I like traveling and visiting places and going to see new and different things. So I've been to 1 out of the 4 that are shown on here. I haven't been to Mexico, never going to go. I haven't been to Athens, probably never going to go. Never been to Japan, probably never going to go, but have been to Paris and been up the Eiffel Tower and possibly will go again. So we'll explore some of these in a little bit more detail in a minute. Trying different food. I'm sure some of you will have tried different foods during your lives, and I've illustrated some things here which you may recognise or you may not. So top left is a turban squash, and you might never have tried this turban, you may never have seen a turban squash, but they're really quite funky. The second ones are some delicious raspberry macaroons, very pretty colour. Then we've got pomegranate, with beautiful red pomegranate seeds, and the far right is Polish dumplings. So it may have been that you've tried some of those, you may not even recognise them. And the last one to look at is moving house. In the last 10 years, I've moved house twice for different reasons. And I'm sure you're not living in the same house that you've always lived in. You will have moved house at some point. So that's been a change, and usually one that you will have chosen to do. So let's just look back at those again. Why did I choose to do those things? So taking up a new hobby. So kayaking was a friend's recommendation. They said, you know, here's a club, why don't you come and join in, family can do it as well. I could have seen it. Often we see things on the internet, social media, that's the way we become engaged with things. Visiting somewhere new, it could be because it looked interesting, maybe we saw somewhere and it got lots of likes. Trying a different food, it was on the menu, that's why I tried it. Moving to a different place could be for a new job location, could be other reasons for moving to a different place as well, to a different home. So let's just break those down a little bit further. So if we go on friends' recommendations or see something on the internet or social media, the reasons we might describe that as prompting our behaviour change would be social. And we're very prompted by what other people do, particularly other people that we think are like us. So that's a social reason. The next one, visiting somewhere new, was to expand my thinking. So curiosity is a trait that quite a lot of people have. They're curious about certain things. And if you look at young children, they are so curious. And sometimes I think we lose that as we get older, but that you can keep that curiosity and expand our thinking. That can be a reason for choosing to do something new. Food that's on the menu, it's an opportunity. It's probably, for me, an opportunity. I would never cook that type of food. If it's on the menu and I see something different, I will try it because it's there and I can. So moving to a different place, could be to a new job location. What we talk about here is moments of change. One of the house moves I did in the last 10 years was a big moment of change. It was moving to a passive house, which I'd never lived in before, gorgeous house, but also moving to a community. Now that's what we might describe as a moment of change, where if you're changing one thing, it's very easy to change something else at the same time. So it was relatively easy for me at that point to move from having a car, which I'd had since I was 18, to not having a car, because there was an infrastructure there to provide me with a car club, an on-site car club. So those moments of change are where in organisations, if you're changing one thing, it's easier at that point to change something else at the same time. There's often less resistance if you do that. So we do choose to do lots of different things, and there are lots of reasons why we choose to do those. So we'll start to explore that in a bit more detail as well. Because if we think about what has prompted us to change our behaviour, whether it's pro-environmental or whether it's taking up a new sport, travel, food, whatever it was, if we think about why we've done that, then it can help us to think about why other people might change as well. So we're going to look at a specific example. We're going to think about a workplace example. Now, in your organisations, you might have already done this and been very successful, or it might be something that you're currently doing or you aspire to do. And that might be to do with your travel plans and how do you encourage active travel and using public transport. So moving people away from using cars to travel to walking, cycling and using public transport. So let's think about those reasons people might give for not changing in relation to active travel and public transport. So if someone says, well, why should I take that change in terms of my travel if no one else is doing it? What we can do is look for any benefits of doing it. Are there any co-benefits? So there might be specific benefits about walking and cycling, but then co-benefits, it's a healthy thing to do, gets you out in the open air. And can we think of any examples of other people who are doing it? And this is where I mentioned before about someone like us. So the social thing, if we can see that other people like us do that, have changed to using active travel or public transport, then that's another way that we can be encouraged to do it, because we can see it's possible. Right, I don't know what to do. That's a relatively easy one to tackle, because information, education, training, and often it's about cycling. So having learned to ride a bike class, bike maintenance courses, information about what the public transport options are for getting to your location. So information, education, training can really help to tackle that I don't know. It's too expensive. Now, this is when you often hear from the people who hold the purse strings. So we have to think of something that's going to tap into their feelings about money. So what are the payback times? Are there any long-term benefits? Are there any short-term benefits as well? So often it might involve some investment, but there might be a payback that we can see in relation to that. There might be an immediate benefit as well. So this one, I don't want to. If people say they don't want to, there must be a reason for them saying that. Can we explore what those reasons are? Can we find out why people don't want to change? And sometimes it's, we've always done it like this, particularly in terms of work practices. Why should we change? It's a bit like, why should I? I don't want to. But what are the reasons for it? And they are often masking another thing, like I don't know what to do. So exploring those reasons can help with that. And then it's too difficult. Well, is it possible to make it easy to do? And is it possible to make it easier to do than alternatives? So can we introduce policies, procedures, practices that might make our active travel and public transport options easier to do than alternatives? Can we offer incentives to do that as well, to make that easier to do? And I mentioned before about the car club. It was easier for me to not have a car because the infrastructure was there for me to be able to participate in the car club. So we'll look at our first model here, which is the combi model, which you may have come across before. And this talks about capability and opportunity feeding into motivation. So those are the two key factors that we need to think about if we want to motivate people to change their behaviour. So we have to explore what's underpinning all of that. Now, this is quite a potentially quite a complicated model. There's quite a lot in this. So we'll just go through this step by step. So let's have a look at capability. There's two aspects to capability. There's the psychological or physical ability to enact the behaviour. We often think about just the physical thing. Can I physically do it? So if we think about cycling, am I physically able to ride a bike? Can I walk the distance that I need to? Can I physically get on and off public transport? But we've also got the psychological capability, which is about knowledge and understanding. So do I know how to do these things? Do I know when and where the buses run? So that's psychological and physical ability to enact the behaviour. Motivation. This model talks about reflective and automatic mechanisms which activate or inhibit behaviours. So the reflective ones are the ones that we have to think about. So those are things like setting goals and making pledges. And the automatic mechanisms are the ones which are probably the more emotional ones. So the positive and negative emotions we might feel that might activate or inhibit our behaviour. So if we feel good about something, we're more likely to do it. And then opportunity, the physical and social environment that enables the behaviour. So the physical, I'd like to get the bus to work, but the bus doesn't run to where I work. So I physically can't do that. I have the physical ability to do it, but the environment doesn't enable me to do that. And the social environment is about those networks and encouragement from other people. So that's the capability, opportunity, motivation we need to think about in relation to behaviour. But this, the combi element, is part of a much bigger model, which I'll look at very quickly with you. It's part of what's called the behaviour change wheel. And this is the first part of the behaviour change wheel. So you've got those sources of behaviour that we looked at that are in green. So you've got capability, opportunity, motivation, with the 2 factors under each of them. And then that's broken down even further. So we've got things like social influences, intentions, goals, reinforcement, emotion, knowledge, a lot of the things that I've already talked about that go into each of those elements of capability, opportunity, and motivation. So we need to explore, if we're looking at behaviour change, we need to explore which of these do we need to address to enable people to behave in the way that we're looking at. So which out of, and it might be all of them, or it might just be some of them. But we need to look at what is the behaviour that we're trying to influence, and which of these in the yellow, which are known as the theoretical domain framework domains, which of these elements do we need to look at addressing to encourage behaviour. Now, what helps us to do this is the next part of the behaviour change wheel. Now, if you can imagine, you can spin the wheel a little bit here. So you've got the capability, opportunity, motivation that forms the hub of the wheel there. And then the work that was done developing this model by Susan Mickey and her team at UCL, they identified what they called 9 intervention functions, which are in the red. So we've got the sources of behaviour in green, the intervention functions in the red, and the policy categories on the outside. For the purposes of what we're looking at here, we're just going to look at the intervention functions, because these are the sorts of things that you could put in place at work as interventions to encourage behaviour change. So there's a whole list of these 9 things here. So we've got education, increasing knowledge or understanding, persuasion, using communication to induce preferably positive feelings. So it's the communication routes that we use. Incentives, you know what that means, expectation of reward. Coercion, expectation of punishment or cost. Training, giving people skills to do things. Restriction is a little bit more complicated. It's the sorts of rules or policies or procedures we could implement to reduce the opportunity to engage in the target behaviour. Using target or increase the target behaviour by reducing the opportunity to engage in competing behaviours. So there's lots of different ways that we can do that, but it's usually through rules. So in the workplace, that would tend to be policies and procedures. So environmental restructuring, changing the physical or social context. So what can we do with the physical context or the social context to encourage or enable behaviour change? And then modelling, I talked about that before, providing an example for people to aspire to or imitate, particularly if it was someone we admire or someone who is similar to us. It's creating those social norms. And last one is enablement, increasing the means and reducing the barriers to increase capability or opportunity. So that could be physical barriers. So let's apply this to our travel. So encouraging walking, cycling, and using public transport. We're focusing here very much on the cycling rather than the public transport. So for education, we could promote cycling through organisational channels, through induction, information about cycle lanes and cycle routes. Persuasion, have a comms plan to cover various media in the organisation, have campaigns. Incentives, can we reward people who cycle to work? Can we use our current reward scheme to do that? Coercion, free cycle parking, but very, very expensive car parking, so there's a cost involved. Training, cycling skills, bike maintenance, I mentioned before. Restriction, this could be the rule that every employee who joins the organisation automatically gets a cycle parking space, and that is free. And in order to get a car parking space, you have to make an application for it, and you have to give justification, and priority is given to people who share their cars with other people, who lift share, and make, again, that car parking very, very expensive. So you're trying to put people off using their cars. You might even have things like a cheaper rate for electric cars, but we want to stop people using cars as much as possible. Environmental restructuring, if you've got a large site, you could prioritise cycle lanes. You could put the cycle storage by the entrance so it's very visible that that's what we do, make it very secure. Modelling, providing inspiration examples, and also things like descriptive norms. So in our persuasion, our campaigns, we could say 50% of our employees use active travel all the time for their commuting. And then enablement, provide lots and lots and lots of cycle parking, lockers, showers. So we can see there how we might choose all of those intervention functions, but what we should do first is discover what is it that is stopping people from cycling to work already, so that we can address those issues. If everyone knows how to cycle, then we don't need to have cycling skills. If people are concerned about security and showers, then that's what we need to implement. So you can see how we need to know what the issues are before we decide what the intervention function is that we apply to our behaviour change process. So I don't know if anyone's come across mind space. This model looks at what sorts of things influence our behaviour. And this was developed by DEFRA a few years ago as part of their looking at pro-environmental behaviour change. So we'll just look at this very quickly and see how many of these you're familiar with, probably all of them. M, the messenger. We've mentioned this before. We're heavily influenced by who communicates information to us. Is it someone we trust, someone we value, someone whose opinion we will take to heart? Incentives. Our responses to the incentives are shaped by predictable mental shortcuts. For example, we are very motivated to strongly avoid anything that we see as being a potential loss. And not everyone will respond to the same incentive. So you might think, oh, we'll give people a financial incentive for cycling. And some people go, I don't want a financial incentive. I'm just doing this because I enjoy cycling. There might be something else that I value more, like, I don't know, an afternoon off a month, particularly if it means I can go and do some more tree planting. Norms. We're strongly influenced by what others do, those social norms, and that ties in a bit with the messenger. So the other people that we value. Defaults. These are the preset options that exist. And so what I mentioned before was the preset option is that as soon as you join the organisation, you get a cycle parking space. There are lots of other default options, like when you're in the cafeteria, what's the first option on the menu? Is it the vegan option or is it the high carbon option? Even things like photocopying, is the option to not photocopy, and then the default setting on the photocopier is for double-sided and black and white, not colour, which makes it a little bit cheaper and less impactful. Salience, we're drawn to what is novel, something new, and what seems relevant to us. Priming, our acts are often influenced by subconscious cues. So, for example, if you go into a hotel or a new building and you want to get to the second floor, what's more obvious? Is it the lift or the stairs? So when you check into the hotel, they usually say, here's your key, and the lift is through the door on the right. They could say, here's your key, the stairs are to the left, and then you have to ask for where the lift is. Affect. Our emotional associations can powerfully shape our actions. So how we feel about something. So if we respond positively or negatively, do we feel good, or does it make us feel uncomfortable? How do we respond to something? Commitments. So making commitments to other people, and you often see schemes, sign up for this pledge. So that might be sign up for being flight free. It might be sign up to reduce your carbon footprint by X amount, and making that commitment public. So again, these are different things that we can bring in to encourage people. And then ego, I like finishing off this one. React in ways that make us feel better about ourselves. And that will be different for everybody. So what makes us feel better about ourselves could be, I feel better when I cycle to work because I know that I've got the exercise and I haven't emitted from burning fossil fuels. I've also saved some money. So Mindspace is another model just to help us think about what sorts of things we respond to. So I said we would look at the 4 E's model. So DEFRA developed Mindspace, and out of that they developed this 4 E's model. Now, as I'm going through this, what I'd like you to do is to think about, is there anything in this model that wasn't covered in the behaviour change wheel and the combi model? So let's start at the top. We've got enable, and that's systems and capacity. Make it easier to act. So make it easy to do something. So remove the barriers, ensure people are able to do it, build understanding, provide facilities, viable alternatives, educate, train, provide skills, provide capacity. So at enable, engage, let's go around this clockwise, engage, get people involved. So working with trusted intermediaries, so working through or with other people, using networks, encouraging people to co-produce systems and procedures, and using insight to mobilize population groups. So can we segment groups into those who don't cycle because they need the training, or those people who don't cycle because they don't feel it's safe, and then can we engage with them as appropriate. Exemplify, demonstrate shared responsibility, lead by example, consistency in policy is always a good idea, demonstrate what other people are doing. And the last one is encourage, provide incentives and disincentives. So incentives to encourage, and disincentives to ensure your target audience responds, but also providing feedback. So I'm going to pose the question to you now and see what answer you come up with. When you're looking at these here, was there anything in this model that you think was not covered in the behaviour change combi model? And if you like to put it in the chat, and then Camilla, if you can see if anyone spotted anything that they think it was not in the combi model.
I will look. It's difficult to remember what was in the combi model while you're, it's like trying to sing one tune to the, think of one tune when you're listening to another.
That's a good analogy, thank you.
Has anybody spotted it?
It might be that it's exactly the same. Everything is covered here that was covered before.
I think you're going to have to tell us, Jan.
Well, it's interesting because I think that getting people involved was not covered in the combi model. It talks about a lot of doing to people as opposed to doing with people. So I think systems and capacity, making it easier, the enable, the exemplify, and the encourage, I think are covered in the other model. But I think what this adds in is the engagement, about working with people. the idea of using networks, getting people to co-produce. And it's what we emphasise in IIE about getting the workforce involved, getting ideas from them. And I'm a firm believer that involving people in change enables greater commitment to the change. So rather than me saying, I'm going to change the waste system to being like this because I think this works better, I'll talk to people and say, you know, what works well about what we do at the moment? This is what we're trying to achieve. How could we do something that would enable us to achieve this? And if they said, let's remove all the bins from under our desks, then that would have come from them rather than me saying, I'm going to remove all the bins from under your desk, which people might react to. So when we say people resist change, I think people resist change more if they haven't been involved in it and if they can't see the benefit of doing it. So this is where I think I like the combi model, I like the capability, opportunity, motivation, but I think it's missing something about getting people involved, which I think is incredibly valuable. And I think if you think back to changes you've experienced being implemented at work, there are some when you might have thought, why on earth are they doing it that way when it should be done this way? If only they'd asked us, we could have told them the best way to do it. So getting people involved in developing those changes, I think, is incredibly powerful. If anyone disagrees with me, then put it in the chat.
I would absolutely agree. I think that's a very valid point. And Claire says people are not necessarily resistant to change, but to being changed. I think that's right.
Yes, yeah, to being changed. And people are willing to change if they can see the benefit of it and if they've been involved in it. Yeah. So I don't know if you've come across this model. This was developed by the Behavioural Insights team, and it's their EAST model of behaviour change. And it's a bit like the 4 E's. We've got four things. This one's easy, attractive, social, and timely. And it does talk about a lot of the things we've already covered. So easy, they talk about using the power of defaults. So making the first option the sustainable one, and reducing the amount of effort needed. Make it something easy to do. People will do it rather than the other thing. So things like where you put the waste bins. If it's easier to put it in this general waste bin, why should I walk to where the recycling bins are? Reduce the effort needed. Simplify the message is another way to make it easy. Attractive. How can we attract people's attention? People like things which have images in. So we often create posters and information leaflets which have images in them to help people to know what's expected of them. But also personalisation is something they talk about here. So if we're sending a message to people, if we can personalise it to the individual. So I know that often people will, if I ask an individual, please could you help me with this, Camilla, she's more likely to do that than if I send something out to everyone saying, please can somebody help me with this. Asking an individual to do something, personalising it can be very, very impactful. And designing rewards and sanctions for maximum effect. What the combi model doesn't talk about is intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation, intrinsic rewards might be, I cycle because it's the right thing to do. I use public transport because it's the right thing to do. So that's an intrinsic value-based motivation. Extrinsic might be, well, if you pay me to do it, I'll do it. If you give me some time off, I'll do it. If you give me, a new cycling, give me a new bike, I'll do it. So you've got to think about your rewards and sanctions. The social element, we've talked about this as well. Show what most people do. Descriptive norms. 50% of people use active travel to get to work. Using the power of existing networks. So can you tap into networks that are already looking at things? And then making commitments. So making commitments, but also making those commitments public. So if you might have a commitment, encourage people, make a commitment to cycle to work 1 day a week. Get people to sign up for that. Other people might sign up, well, I'll go 3 days a week. And then you can give feedback on that and monitor that. Timely, we talked about moments of change before. So if you know that maybe there's a change in a system being introduced, can you introduce, let's say, you can introduce going paper light at the same time. Could you introduce, we're moving offices, but we've also made them easier to get to by public transport. And these are the ways to do it, and encourage people to do it that way. Consider those costs and benefits over time. And another thing under timely might be to help people to plan how to change. So what are the steps that they might go through? So it might be obtain a bike, we can help you with that. Learn how to cycle, we can help you with that. Find out how to get to work, we can help you with that. So helping people to what the steps are they might need to go through to plan that change. So those 3 models, I think, offer us slightly different things. And if you were thinking about trying to motivate colleagues to use active travel to get to work, just think about those 3 models. I'd like you to put in the chat, Combi, 4E's or East. Which of those actions, which of those models would you use? You might be attracted to the more complicated behaviour change wheel. You might like the 4E's, or you might like East. So
we've got a mixture. 1 vote for 4E's, 1 for East, another for East, 4E's. So,
and this is specifically in relation to an active travel behaviour change.
Combination of Combi and 4E's. 4E's coming out quite popular now, I think.
Yeah, maybe I did a good selling job on getting people involved.
Well, you did. I think the mention of the engagement is, you know, that I think everybody recognises that it's important to take people with you, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'm just getting you to think about those models. Okay, the last poll kind of builds on that. And if we were to think about behaviour change in general, encouraging your colleagues to behave more sustainably, which of those models would you be most likely to use? Would that be Combi, the behaviour change wheel, the 4E's, East, or you've got the option there of a combination. So could you put the poll up then, please?
Yeah, April should be able to launch that again.
Just give me a moment. It's only showing the previous poll, so let me see if I can troubleshoot for a moment.
I'll say that there isn't a right answer to this. It's just, I just wanted to find out what maybe how you viewed each of these, what you felt about them.
Meanwhile, I'll come back on video. It's always great, isn't it, that that you set everything up with, think you got it all right as you're setting things up. Maybe we could do it another way, and if people put their hands up, would that work?
Well, the poll came up.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah. I know, because I voted. Right. And there's a response. Right. Oh, that's really interesting. From the people who submitted, and I don't know how many voted, nobody chose the behaviour change one. That might be because that's quite complicated. I think if you've got a complex behaviour change that you're looking at, something that is really quite tricky to implement, I think that's the one to go for. The 4E's, I think, is very similar in what it covers, but I think maybe because we talked about the engagement part, people have gone for that one. Easter's got a few, and we've got quite a few people who are going for the combination. So thank you very much for that. So there's some ideas in each of those models that you could take away and think about when you're implementing your behaviour change. So I could have chosen any number of top tips. These are just ones that I've selected for today. You may take away different things from today, but I would say my top tips are, if you're designing a behaviour change intervention, you need to really specify what the target behaviour is. What do you want to achieve? Is it 100% of employees cycling to work? Is it 50% cycling, 50% public transport? Or is it just an increase on what we currently have? So do we know what the current behaviour is, and do we know what the gap is? So I think it's important to set targets for what you want to achieve with your behaviour change and to analyse what people are currently doing, to have that baseline, that benchmark, and to see what the gap is. So I would say that's always the first thing that needs to be done. Identify possible reasons for resistance. So can we find out why people might not be choosing that behaviour currently? And what sorts of things might get in the way of doing that? Create default options. I think default options have been proven to be very, very helpful. And they could be around capability or opportunity. So that could be physical or psychological capability and physical and social opportunity. Make it social. Find some examples, use networks, make commitments, get people involved in doing it. Emphasize meaningful co-benefits. So you can often encourage people to do something, not because of the intrinsic value of it, but because of some other benefit they might get from it. And encourage through incentives, if possible. And those can be anything, rewards and incentives in your organisation, and where possible, using the current systems that you've got for incentives. So that's the last one there. Consider a combi 4 E's and East. You don't have to use them, but there's sometimes they can prompt you to think about, oh, have I thought about doing that part in my behaviour change intervention? So it might encourage you to think about all the elements that you could possibly choose. So that concludes the session, apart from if anyone has any questions. I'm going to ask Camilla, have any questions gone into the chat during the session?
Not actually during, a couple about whether we're sharing the slides and the recording. And April has mentioned that we have some useful template surveys which you can tailor to get to the bottom of barriers to behaviour change, and which I think are available in the members section of the website. But if people want to put up I'm going to bring up their hands if they have a question, or unmute themselves and ask, or type it into the chat box if you're reluctant to to pipe up. But I was interested in, we were at a carbon literacy training at the weekend, and the other thing that is a good motivator, and this is more about having the conversation about how to get people thinking about climate change and what they can do to reduce their impact. So similar, I suppose, and making it personal. So, if you cycle to work, the air will just be a little bit cleaner for both you and for your children. That sort of thing really helps to make it mean something for people, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I would describe those as co-benefits.
Yeah.
There's personal benefits, but then there's those advantages.
Yeah, but she was very keen to emphasise this sort of making it personal. But yes, they are co-benefits. Any other questions? I also like the it was the priming and appealing to the subconscious. I think this obviously really appeals to me, because I watched I think it was Hugh Fanley-Whitting's stall on his mission to get people in Newcastle a bit fitter, or was it London? It might have been a London example, this particular one, but anyway, they put footprints on the coming out of the metro or the tube, and they put the footprints to go up the stairs rather than up the escalators, and it increased the use of stairs by 400% or something. So it's really interesting, just people following the subliminal signs or something, rather than doing what they would normally do, which was go up the escalators.
And the other thing that I've seen people do is if you want someone to do something, like to use a particular receptacle, is to put eyes on it, so they feel like somebody's watching them.
Yes, for in areas of litter. Yes, I've heard that too. Yeah, amazing, interesting.